Naya Siren pressed her fingertips against the observation dome, watching the stars blur as the transport ship approached the human space station Concordia. The purple hue of her skin reflected in the glass, reminding her how different she would appear to the humans. She took a deep breath, struggling with the familiar knot of anxiety in her chest. Among her people, the Luminans' telepathy wasn't just communication, it was identity, connection, belonging. Without the ability to project her thoughts, Naya had lived 26 cycles as an outlier, relying on rudimentary gesture systems her family had developed. Though her receptive abilities were intact, she could receive others' projections. She could never respond in kind. "Docking sequence initiated," announced the automated system. Naya gathered her few belongings, including the small communication tablet that translated her gestures into basic Luminin and human standard. It was primitive, humiliating to use, but necessary. The science exchange program had been her last hope. If human technology couldn't help her, nothing would. Dr. Theo Harrison rubbed his tired eyes as he reviewed the incoming participant files. As Concordia's lead xenoneurologist, he'd been assigned to the most challenging case, a telepathically mute Luminin. "You're working late again," Dr. Maya Chen said, entering his lab with 2 steaming cups. "I brought you some actual coffee. The synthesized stuff is making everyone hallucinate." Theo accepted the cup gratefully. "Have you seen these readings? The Luminin subject shows normal receptive patterns, but complete inability to generate telepathic signals." Maya peered at his screens, like sensory aphasia in humans, but for telepathy. "Fascinating. It's more than fascinating. It's unprecedented." Theo scrolled through the data. "Her brain structure is intact. There's no obvious physical reason for the block. Maybe it's psychological," Maya suggested. "Maybe, or maybe something we've never encountered before," wincing at its bitterness. "Either way, she arrives tomorrow." When Naya disembarked at Concordia, she was immediately struck by the sensory overload. After the calm, orderly telepathic exchanges of Lumina, the cacophony of verbal languages, mechanical noises, and emotional chaos left her dizzy. She clutched her tablet tighter, forcing herself to walk forward as curious eyes followed her progress through the arrival hall. "Ms. Siren?" A human approached, tall with warm brown skin and dark curly hair. "I'm Dr. Theo Harrison. Welcome to Concordia." Naya nodded, quickly typing on her tablet. The mechanical voice spoke for her. "Thank you for accepting me into your program." Theo's eyes softened with understanding. "We're honored to have you. I've been studying your case for weeks." He gestured toward a quieter corridor. "I've arranged quarters for you near the lab. We can begin assessments tomorrow after you've rested." As they walked, Theo pointed out various features of the station, filling the silence with information about Concordia's research facilities. Naya appreciated his effort, but noticed how he occasionally glanced at her. With scientific curiosity, she was a puzzle to solve, an anomaly to study. In her quarters, Theo showed her the environmental controls adjusted for Luminin physiology. "Is there anything else you need?" he asked. Naya hesitated, then typed, "Most humans expect all Luminins to read their thoughts. I can receive projections, but cannot project back. Please speak aloud." Theo nodded. "Of course. I should have realized." Seemed genuinely apologetic. "We'll develop a communication protocol that works for both of us." After he left, Naya stood at her window, watching the distant purple glow of Lumina. For the first time in her life, someone had immediately accommodated her needs without making her feel broken. That night, Dr. Harrison reviewed Naya's complete file. Unlike most Luminans who developed telepathic projection in childhood, Najee had shown early promise but suddenly lost the ability after an illness at age 7. The Luminin medical experts had declared her condition permanent.
Ow.
"But they didn't have our technology," Theo murmured to himself, sketching ideas for a neural interface that might bypass the block in Naya's telepathic centers. If he could map the exact pathway of telepathic projection in functioning Luminins, perhaps he could create an artificial bridge for Naya. It wasn't just scientific curiosity driving him. The look in her eyes, a mixture of hope and resignation, had affected him deeply. He understood what it meant to be silenced, to be unable to express one's true self. His own childhood stutter had isolated him until therapy and technology helped him overcome it. "Tomorrow," they would begin the long journey of discovery together. Theo hoped he could give Naya something no one else had offered. Not just a voice, but understanding. 3 weeks into her stay on Concordia, Naya sat perfectly still as Dr. Harrison calibrated the neural interface circlet. The sleek device rested against her temples, its cool metal a stark contrast to her warm purple skin. "This might feel strange," Theo warned, adjusting the final settings. "The interface will map your neural pathways when you attempt to project telepathically. Try to think of something simple you'd like to communicate." Naya closed her eyes, concentrating on a basic greeting. For years she'd attempted this simple act, reaching out with her thoughts only, to feel them dissipate like smoke. The circlet hummed softly against her skin. "Interesting," Theo murmured, watching the data stream across his monitors. "Your receptive pathways are extraordinarily developed. Likely compensation for the projective block. And there's unusual activity in your emotional processing centers." Naya opened her eyes, typing quickly on her tablet. "What does that mean?" "It means," Theo said, leaning closer to examine the readings, "that your brain might be trying to communicate in a different way than standard Luminan telepathy. Almost as if—" He trailed off, lost in thought. The next day, they were interrupted by Administrator Voss, a stern woman who oversaw all xenobiology research on Concordia. "Dr. Harrison," she said, barely acknowledging Naya's presence, "the Luminan Council has expressed concerns about your work with Subject Siren." "Participant Siren," Theo corrected firmly. "And what concerns?" Voss's mouth tightened. "They believe attempting to artificially induce telepathic abilities may disturb their cultural practices. They've authorized diagnostic studies only." After she left, Theo turned to Naya with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry. Politics always complicates science." Naya's fingers flew across her tablet. "My people fear what they don't understand. To them, my silence is an aberration that reminds them of their fragility." Something in her words resonated with Theo. That night, reviewing their session data, he noticed a pattern he'd missed before: subtle emotional markers that appeared whenever Naya attempted communication. Following a hunch, he redesigned the interface, adding components to amplify and translate emotional signatures rather than telepathic signals. For 2 weeks, they worked in secret, officially conducting standard diagnostic studies, while Theo refined his new device. When it was ready, he invited Naya to his private lab after hours. "This isn't a cure for telepathic projection," he explained, showing her the modified circlet. "It's something to translator for a language you're already speaking." Naya raised a questioning eyebrow as she accepted the device. "Your empathic signatures," Theo said. "They're unusually structured, almost like a language themselves. I think you've been communicating all along, just not in a way anyone recognized." As the circlet activated, Naya closed her eyes, concentrating not on projecting words but on the feelings behind them: her gratitude toward Theo, her hope for success, her fear of disappointment. A soft chime sounded from the interface, and a synthesized voice spoke, "Thank you for seeing me." Naya's eyes flew open in shock, meeting Theo's gaze. For the first time, words that were truly hers had been spoken aloud. "It worked," Theo whispered, his professional demeanor breaking into a wide smile. Tears welled in Naya's eyes as the circlet continued. "Translating, all this time, I thought I was broken, but I was speaking a different language." In the weeks that followed, Theo refined the interface, making it smaller and more responsive. Naya's emotional language proved complex and nuanced where standard telepathy transmitted concrete thoughts. Her projections carried layers of meaning through emotional context. Administrator Voss remained suspicious of their work but couldn't deny the results. The Luminan Council, initially resistant, grew curious about this alternative form of communication. "They're sending a representative to observe our progress," Theo informed Naya one evening as they worked late in the lab. "They never believed I had anything worth saying before," the circlet translated as Naya adjusted its settings. "Why listen now?" "Because you've proven them wrong," Theo replied, unconsciously moving closer to her. "And because you have a brilliant mind that deserves to be heard." Naya looked up. suddenly aware of how close they were standing. The air between them seemed charged with something beyond professional collaboration. The circlet chimed softly. "I wouldn't have found my voice without you." "That's not true," Theo said gently. "Your voice was always there. I just helped create the right microphone." As he reached out to adjust the circlet, his fingers brushed against her temple. Both froze at the contact, a current of awareness passing between them. For a brief moment, professional boundary between researcher and participant wavered. Theo pulled back first, clearing his throat. "We should prepare for tomorrow's demonstration."
But
Something had shifted between them, a connection forming that neither had anticipated when their work began. The Luminen representative, Counselor Erith, arrived with an entourage of scientists and cultural observers. Tall and imposing with the characteristic purple skin of their species, though several shades darker than Naya's. Erith regarded the human space station with barely concealed disdain. "We have permitted this research as a courtesy," Erith stated during their first meeting. "But artificial communication methods are not recognized in Luminen society. True connection comes only through natural telepathic bonds." Naya stood straighter as her circlet translated her emotional response. "And those born without your definition of natural deserve no place in society." Theo admired her courage even as he worried about the political implications of challenging the counselor directly. The demonstration proceeded despite the tension. Naya wore the refined circlet, now elegant enough to resemble jewelry rather than medical equipment. As she engaged with various tests, the interface translated her emotional language flawlessly, revealing complex thoughts and perspectives that impressed even the skeptical Luminen scientists. "Fascinating technology," one admitted. "But is it authentic communication or merely a simulation?" "The question reveals your bias," Naya's circlet translated. "You assume differences must be deficiencies." That evening, after the Luminans returned to their quarters, Theo found Naya alone in the observation dome. Staring at the stars, "You were brilliant today," he said, joining her by the viewport. "You've opened their minds, even if they won't admit it yet." The circlet chimed softly. "For the first time, they heard me. Not pitied me, not accommodated me, actually heard me." Theo hesitated, then confessed, "I've been invited to present our work at the Interspecies Medical Conference on Earth. They want you to come too as a collaborator, not a subject." Naya turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. The circlet translated equal recognition. "That's unprecedented. You deserve it. This breakthrough is as much yours as mine." Something shifted in Naya's eyes, a vulnerability she rarely showed. The circlet remained silent for a moment before translating. "On Lumina, I was always seen as broken. Here, working with you, I've found purpose. More than that, I've found connection." Theo moved closer, the professional distance he'd maintained beginning to dissolve. "Naya, I need to tell you something. My interest in your case has become ... personal. I find myself thinking about you beyond our work together." The circlet translated Naya's response with a slight tremor in its synthesized voice. "I've felt it too. A resonance between us I can't explain scientifically." "Is that why you sometimes remove the circlet when we're alone?" Theo asked softly. Naya nodded, reaching up to deactivate the device. Without its translation, they stood in silence, communicating only through glances and subtle expressions. Slowly, Theo raised his hand, gently touching her cheek. Naya leaned into the contact, her eyes conveying what technology couldn't translate: desire, trust, and something deeper forming between them. When their lips met, the connection transcended words, telepathy, and even the emotional language that had bridged their worlds. For a moment, they were simply two beings, finding understanding in each other's arms. The romance blossoming between them complicated their professional relationship. Administrator Voss warned Theo about ethical boundaries. While Counselor Erith implied that Naya's judgment was compromised by human influence, "They want to discredit what we've achieved," Theo said frustratedly after another tense meeting with station officials. "They can accept a scientific breakthrough, but not the idea that different species might genuinely connect. Connection threatens power structures," Naya's circlet translated. "My people fear what they cannot control. Humans fear what they cannot categorize. We exist outside those limitations. Their private moments together became a refuge from the political tensions. Theo marveled at how Naya communicated without the circlet through touch, expression, and a growing intuitive understanding between them. In turn, Naya discovered the beauty of verbal language as Theo taught her human expressions and metaphors that captured feelings standard Luminine telepathy never acknowledged. One night, as they lay together in the dim light of Theo's quarters, Naya traced patterns on his chest, her purple fingers stark against his brown skin. Without the circlet, she pointed to his heart, then to hers, raising a questioning eyebrow. "Yes," Theo whispered, understanding perfectly. "I love you too. Across language, across species, I love you." As their relationship deepened, so did the opposition to their work. Rumors spread through Concordia about inappropriate experimentation and compromised research. The Luminine Council threatened to withdraw from the science exchange program entirely. "We've become a symbol," Theo realized. Holding Naya close one evening as they received news of yet another hearing scheduled to review their project. And symbols are always threatening to those who prefer the status quo. Naya activated her circlet to respond. "Then we must become more than symbols. We must become the bridge that makes others brave enough to cross." Their greatest challenge still lay ahead, but in each other. They had found something neither science nor politics could measure or control it. Harmony that transcended the silence and the void between their worlds. 3 days before the Interspecies Medical Conference, Concordia Station erupted in chaos. A radical human group calling themselves Pure Evolution staged protests throughout the research sectors. Their message was clear. Alien-human collaboration threatened humanity's independence, particularly when it involved neural technology. "They're claiming your circlet could be weaponized," Maya explained, as she helped Theo secure the lab. "That emotional manipulation could be used against humans who don't have telepathic defenses." Theo slammed his hand against the workstation. "It's not manipulation. They're deliberately misrepresenting our work." Outside the lab windows, protesters gathered, their signs displaying xenophobic slogans. Security officers formed a barrier, but the tension was palpable. Naya watched from the corner, her circlet translating her distress. "This fear, I recognize it. It's the same fear my people have of difference." The situation deteriorated when Counselor Erith called an emergency meeting with Administrator Voss, demanding Naya's immediate return to Lumina for her own protection. Theo attended the meeting, arguing passionately against the decision. "This is exactly the wrong response," he insisted. "Giving in to extremists only validates their position." "The Luminine Council disagrees," Erith replied coldly. "We will not risk one of our citizens in this volatile environment." Voss looked uncomfortable, but nodded. "I'm sorry, Dr. Harrison, but I must prioritize station security. The transfer will proceed tomorrow morning." That night, Theo and Naya met in secret in the Botanical Garden, the one place on Concordia without surveillance. Among the exotic plants from dozens of worlds, they held each other in desperate silence. "They can't separate us," Theo whispered against her hair. "We'll find a way." Naya removed her circlet, setting it aside to communicate in the wordless language they'd developed together. She placed her hand over his heart, then gestured toward the stars visible through the garden dome. "I know," Theo said. "No matter the distance." She shook her head firmly, then reached for her tablet, typing quickly. "No separation. I have a plan." The next morning, as station security prepared for Naya's departure, alarms blared throughout Concordia. All communication systems simultaneously broadcast the same message in both verbal, language, and emotional signatures that even non-luminins could somehow perceive. The message was simple but profound. Images and sensations of different species working together. The emotional truth of connection across difference. The scientific data from Theo and Naya's research showing how various forms of communication complemented rather than threatened each other. In the control center, technicians scrambled to locate the source of the transmission. "It's coming from the emotional translator technology," one finally reported. Someone has amplified it to station-wide range. Theo rushed to the docking bay, where he found Naya standing calmly, her circlet glowing with unusual intensity. Around her, security personnel and protesters alike stood transfixed, experiencing for the first time the emotional language she had always spoken. "What have you done?" he asked in amazement. The circlet translated, "I've removed the barrier between speaking and hearing. Everyone on this station is experiencing true communication beyond words." "Beyond telepathy?" Administrator Voss pushed through the crowd, her face flushed with anger that quickly faded to confusion as she entered the range of Naya's amplified projections. This isn't possible," Voss stammered. "I can feel everything you're trying to express, because you're finally listening," Theo said, moving to stand beside Naya. "This is what we've been trying to explain. Communication isn't about domination or conformity. It's about finding the frequency where understanding becomes possible." Even Counselor Erith appeared affected, the typical Luminan composure cracking to reveal genuine surprise. "You've developed a tertiary communication pathway," the counselor admitted. "One that neither humans nor Luminans recognized existed." The pure evolution protesters found their hatred difficult to maintain in the face of direct emotional connection. Many lowered their signs, confusion replacing certainty in their expressions. "This connection will only last while the amplifier is active," Naya's circlet explained. "But the memory of understanding can remain if you choose to remember it." As the effects spread throughout Concordia, something remarkable happened. The divisions between species, between different forms of communication, temporarily dissolved. In that shared experience, a new possibility emerged, not of erasing differences, but of bridging them. When the transmission finally ended, the silence felt profound. Security personnel looked uncertainly at their weapons. Protesters glanced awkwardly at their signs. And in the midst of this transformed space, Theo took Naya's hand openly. "We're still going to Earth," he announced to Voss and Erith. Our presentation at the conference just became even more important. Surprisingly, neither objected. Whatever they had experienced during Naya's transmission had shaken their certainties enough to create an opening for change, as they prepared to depart for Earth. Naya and Theo knew their journey had become about much more than a single communication device or relationship. They were carrying the possibility of a new kind of understanding, one that might eventually transform relations between all sentient species. "Are you nervous?" Theo asked as their shuttle prepared for departure. Naya's circlet translated, her response with a hint of humor, about presenting groundbreaking neuroscience to the galaxy's top medical experts. "Or about meeting your parents afterward." Theo laughed, squeezing her hand. "Both terrifying prospects, but we've faced worse together." The circlet chimed softly. "Together. That's the word that matters." The grand auditorium of the Earth Science Academy buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from 17 species filled the tiered seating, their diverse communication methods creating a background hum of voices, clicks, telepathic fields, and translation devices. On stage, Theo adjusted his presentation materials one final time while Naya stood nearby. Her purple skin luminescent under the lights, the refined circlet elegantly encircling her head like a crown. "Distinguished colleagues," Theo began, once the audience quieted, "what you are about to witness isn't merely a technological breakthrough, but a philosophical reimagining of what communication means across species." For the next 30 minutes, he outlined their research, explaining how Naya's unique neural patterns had revealed an entirely new communication. Pathway 1, based on emotional resonance, rather than concrete thought transmission. When it was Naya's turn to speak, she stepped forward confidently. The circlet translated her emotional language into multiple verbal languages simultaneously, while projection screens displayed the neural patterns for telepathic species. "I lived 26 cycles believing I was broken." Her words flowed through the auditorium. "Now I understand I was simply speaking a language no one had recognized. How many other voices remain unheard because we lack the imagination to perceive them?" The demonstration that followed left the audience in stunned silence. Naya and Theo had developed a simplified version of the station-wide experience they'd created on Concordia. Volunteers from different species reported momentary but profound connections, glimpses of understanding that transcended their biological communication barriers. When the lights came up after their presentation, the applause was thunderous. Questions poured in from all sides, and academic rivalries were temporarily forgotten in the excitement of new possibilities. "The implications for interspecies diplomacy are staggering," declared the Tellurian ambassador. "This could revolutionize treatment for communication disorders across all known species," added the head of the Galactic Medical Association. As the conference continued over the next week, Naya and Theo found themselves at the center of a scientific revolution. Research teams from multiple worlds requested permission to develop applications based on their work. The Luminant Council, unable to ignore their success, officially recognized emotional resonance as a valid form of communication. "They're calling it the Siren Protocol," Maya told them during a celebration dinner. "Named after you, Naya, you've become a symbol of communication innovation throughout the galaxy." Naya's circlet translated her mixed emotions. Names and recognition matter less than action. Will this actually change how we treat those who communicate differently? "It already has," Theo assured her, recounting reports of new translation initiatives being developed for previously marginalized groups across multiple worlds. After the academic whirlwind, they finally visited Theo's family home, a modest dwelling near the Pacific Ocean. His parents welcomed Naya with genuine warmth. Having followed their work through news reports, "My mother had a stroke when I was young," Theo's father explained to Naya as they walked along the beach at sunset. "For years, doctors thought her mind was gone because she couldn't speak." Theo's interest in alternative communication began there. He saw her Naya's circlet translated. "As he saw me." That evening, as waves crashed against the shore, Theo led Naya to a quiet spot on the beach. The moons cast silver light across the water, and in the distance, the glow of orbiting stations dotted the night sky. "These past months have transformed everything I thought I knew about communication." "Connection of in love," Theo said, taking both her hands in his. "Scientific partnerships are valuable, but what we've found goes beyond research." Naya's circlet remained silent as she looked at him, allowing her expressions and touch to convey what technology couldn't capture. "We come from different worlds, different biological systems, different communication paradigms," Theo continued. "But we've created something new between USA Harmony that didn't exist before." He dropped to one knee in the sand. In human tradition, this gesture asks a question. Will you continue this journey with me? Not just as research partners, but as life partners. Naya gently removed her circlet, setting it aside on a nearby rock. Without translation, without technology, she knelt before him in the sand, taking his face between her hands. The tears in her eyes reflected starlight as she nodded, pressing her forehead to his in the traditional Luminant gesture of deepest commitment. Words spoken, telepathic, or translated weren't necessary for this moment of perfect understanding. 6 months later, Concordia Station hosted the inaugural Interspecies Communication Summit. The once sterile research facility had been transformed with representation from dozens of worlds. At its center stood the newly established Siren Harrison Institute, dedicated to developing communication pathways between all sentient beings. Naya and Theo led the opening ceremony together. The circlet she wore now was one of many designs being adapted for various species and needs. Across the galaxy, similar devices were helping those previously silenced to find their voices. "Our differences are not obstacles to overcome," Naya's translated words echoed through the hall. "They are variations in a greater symphony. The challenge is not to make everyone speak the same language, but to create spaces where all languages can be heard." As Theo watched his partner address the assembled delegates, he marveled at how far they had come from that first awkward meeting when he had seen her only as a fascinating research subject. Now, their personal and professional lives were interwoven into something neither could have imagined alone. Later, in their private quarters, Naya showed Theo her latest project modified circlet designed for humans with communication disorders, allowing them to express through emotional resonance what verbal language couldn't capture. "You've come full circle," Theo observed, "using what you learned from your own experience to help others." The circlet translated Naya's response with the nuanced emotion that had become her signature. We all exist in silence until someone truly listens. You've listened to me. Now we help others be heard. As night fell over Concordia, they stood at their viewport watching distant ships arrive from across the galaxy, each carrying individuals eager to join the communication revolution they had sparked. Between the stars of their respective home systems, Naya and Theo had found not just a voice, but a harmony, one that continued to resonate across the vast distances of space, bridging worlds that once seemed impossibly far apart. In the end, it wasn't science alone that had created understanding, but the courage to reach across difference, to listen beyond words, and to believe that connection was possible even in the deepest silences of the universe.